Good evening, welcome to the Toronto Debating Society for April 19th. Tonight we have a regular debate on the topic that the early years of love are best. And we will define the early years as the first three, and love being a romantic relationship and best being most enjoyable.
Isn't that a little bit of a new wrinkle?
Yeah.
I don't think you can say that.
Okay.
First 20. That's debatable.
We'll leave it at being undefined, as the early years are simply the early years, and leave it at that, right? So our first speaker for the evening, are you the Prime Minister?
We'll soon see. We'll soon see.
Our first speaker for the evening will be Jerry, who will speak for 7 minutes. Please welcome Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the opposition, we have before us the resolution that the first time in a relationship is the most enjoyable, something to that effect. I'm going to call my first point the time of bliss. We can all remember back when we were dating, perhaps, how nervous you were, how excited you were, how much you looked forward to going out with that male or female for the first time, and that sort of carries over after you're in a relationship. It carries over for 3 months, 3 years, whatever time period that is. And that's an exciting time for all of us in our relationships. You're getting to know each other. You're excited to find things out about your partner that you had not known before. That was a time when you look forward to coming home every night to meet your partner. Maybe not so much after 15 or 20 years, but certainly the first year or two. You have young friends. And this is all on the average, by the way. Certainly it doesn't go for everybody. You have young friends. You look forward to parties on the weekends mainly, but almost any time. Because when you're young, you can party all night, get a couple of hours of sleep, and then head to work in the morning. I vaguely remember doing that when I was younger. It's a time of absolute excitement, very, very enjoyable. You look forward to every day, and every day was a new adventure. You had time on your side, lots and lots of time. The weekends were for doing whatever with your partner. The world was open to you. My second point is that this is a time when you are the least encumbered in your life. By that I mean, again, on the average, you probably are renting wherever you live instead of owning. So you're not encumbered by a big mortgage or, paying everything on time and the thoughts of paying down your mortgage and all that paperwork. You probably, on average, have no kids at the start of your relationship. So you're not encumbered by kids. Now, kids are a wonderful thing. They're wonderful, but they tie you down. And anybody who says otherwise is wrong. You have responsibilities with kids, payment, or lots of money raising kids. What is it, $20,000, $30,000 or $50,000, whatever the number is, to raise a child. So you're not paying for a house. You probably don't have kids at the beginning. That means you have a lot of extra money. It may not seem like it at the time, but later on, when you have a house you're paying for, and you're paying for this and that and the other of your kids, and 16 things a week where you're dipping your pocket, giving money to your kids, you'll find out that you have lots more money when you're younger. You may not think about it, but it works out that way. So, you have time, you have money, you have time for vacations, time for trips, time to visit here, visit there, time to take 2 weeks off and fly to Europe and visit places that you've always wanted to see. You're not going to have this time later on when you're encumbered with a house, kids, everything else. You might still be able to take vacations, but you will have far more time, far more money unencumbered. You have few long-term commitments, as I'm saying. So the world is your oyster at this time in your relationship. My third point is that it is around youth and health. Now I'm going to take the opposite side. My partner later will speak at the same topic, but from the positive side. I'm going to take the negative side. As you get older, as your relationship grows older, when you've been in the same relationship for 10 or 15 or 20 years, whatever it is, you are going to start increasingly having some health problems. It's unavoidable, we don't like it, but it does happen. Your eyesight gets bad, your hearing gets bad, your teeth all start having problems. Your teeth are not what they once were, or not in your head anyway. Your hair starts semi-disappearing, and these are the good things. What's going on inside of you, who knows? We all know that there are lots and lots of things that go wrong with us as we get older. It's scary, it's not fun, but early in our relationship, you don't have to worry, you don't even think about this stuff. You don't worry about it, you don't think about it. You don't have to pay for all this stuff. As we get older, or as our relationships grow older and older, we have parents. We have aunts and uncles who increasingly are going to be needing our help. And like it or not, we have to be there for them, monetarily, time-wise, caring for them. Eventually, you're going to have loved ones that die. You're going to be going to a lot more funerals than you do weddings. And increasingly, you have to deal with problems. Whether they're your friends' problems, your parents' problems, you're going to have a lot to deal with. And this does not make relationships more enjoyable. Now, from a personal point of view, I would like to say that in 3 relationships, definitely the first 3 months were better than the last 3 months. The first 3 years were better than the last 3 years. So from that point of view, I defy the opposition to speak against that. So, time of bliss, first part of your relationship, wonderful, exciting times. Secondly, very few encumbrances at the beginning of a relationship, so lots of time, money to do things. And finally, you have your youth at the beginning as opposed to how you're going to end up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. Our next speaker will be Michael, the leader of the opposition, who will refute some of Jerry's points, make some of his own, and he will speak for 7 minutes. Thank you.
Please don't start until I figure out how to use this machine.
Big circle.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I've been defied to come up here. I thought that was my right, but I've been defied to come up here. After I do my refuting of the previous speaker, I will, my partner and I have divided. I'm going to be talking about why the early years aren't the most enjoyable, and my partner will be talking about why the later years are the most enjoyable. But to do some refuting, which isn't that difficult, we were told that the early years are that time of bliss, without defining what actually that was. He also said, and I'm sure will recall, said that it's not for everybody, those early years. And if I would ask the leader if it's not for everybody, why is that? Also that he also said, and I quote, that the early years are great for doing whatever with your partner. Now, doesn't that sound appealing? Doesn't that sound appealing to be able to do whatever with your partner? Boy, that sounds like, I mean, boy. I also talked about that you're renting, you're renting, but usually you're renting a small flat or a cramped condo, not conducive to space. He said you're not paying for a house. Well, what couple isn't saving heavily for that house in those early years? So yes, you're not paying for the house, but you were putting every penny you can away to save money. So bad argument, doesn't hold water. The world is your oyster, we're told in those years. But I would like to tell you that an oyster, the pearl in an oyster takes years to develop, to be beautiful, just like a relationship. They suggest that you're more passionate in those early years. I would like to remind the government that you don't have to be in a committed relationship to have lots of passion in your life. Not necessary to be in a relationship for that. I'm sure some of you know that, or would like to know that. Love is chemistry, those early years, but isn't it better when love can have a relationship based on caring behavior and a commitment to each other? More energy when you're in those early years? Yes, you probably do have more energy, but where does it go into? It goes into things that have very little to do with the relationship, which I will get into in my argument. So now I'd like to talk about why those early years are not the most enjoyable years. Most people in those early years of a relationship are either have young kids or are trying to have young kids, and we know the problems of people at those early years who are not able to have children who want them. That's not a fun time for those people. And having young kids in diapers, screaming, daycare, sick kids, not easy time for a young couple. Even the discussion about whether to have kids in those early years can sometimes lead to problems. So kids can be a problem for those early years. Often the couple doesn't have a lot of money to do the things they'd like to. And that money they do have, they're usually putting away for their future. Often the career pressures. Most couples today, both of them are working. There's all sorts of pressures for career and work, and they come home at night. Sometimes they're not home together. Sometimes there's travel. Sometimes one has to be promoted to another city. Creates all sorts of problems in those early years. So career is a big problem. It takes a lot of energy from the relationship. I needn't mention to those of you who have in-laws that those in-laws in those early years can be problems. I'll let that one speak for itself. If you've had those experiences, I feel sorry for you. If you haven't, do anything you can to avoid them. There's more competition for partners in those early years. Don't laugh. Seriously. Office affairs, extramarital difficulties all happen in those early years. The 7-year itch, and I'm not going to even get about what causes that itch. It's another whole situation. There's the expectations of marriage are very high. People think that their life is going to be happy, and then the reality hits in those early years, and sometimes those expectations are not met with reality. As I mentioned before, often both of the partners are working, and that creates all sorts of time problems, pressure problems, bringing home the work. It's very difficult in today's working atmosphere to make a living for two people to do it, and most relationships require both to work, and that's a whole new pressure that makes it a lot harder for early relationships in our society. Not so true in our parents' and grandparents' generations. But now both of them are working. This is a new social phenomenon that really impacts negatively on those early years. I would also, the government talked about, entertaining, but he did acknowledge that it's mostly on the weekends. And if you have young kids, your parties are usually spent changing diapers and and being embarrassed about your kid being so loud and punching the other kid. My mind's going to look at here. Now I ask you that, if those early years are so great, why is it that so many couples never make it past those early years? That's the reality. If they're so terrific, how come almost half the couples in our society never make it past those years? That is the essence of our argument. is that if they're so great, how come half the people in our society divorce? So I suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that those, as the 1 minute bill, 1 minute. Now, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Did you
no,
forget?
seriously, 1 minute left.
So then, I
55
didn't remind you about
seconds.
that, you were gonna do
I was
that. Okay.
50 seconds.
Because I sort of thought, since I'm running out of arguments, that I thought that maybe.
45
I
seconds.
thought, how many more seconds?
40.
45 seconds.
40.
See, this is the problem of time. In your early years, time, you just don't have time for enough. You needed someone with a stopwatch just to be able to agree with your partner when you're gonna be, to Wednesday, we're gonna have dinner together. Oh, sorry, I have to work late. I have to work late. So ladies and gentlemen, the arguments of the government, excuse me, don't hold water. The early years are tough. The later years, for which my partner will be talking about why they're so. Is this being taped? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's my argument.
Saved by the bell. Would you please,
My mummy.
he somehow gets that extra time all the time, doesn't he? Would you please welcome, please, the member for the government, Jonathan, who will speak for 5 minutes, and he will attempt some refutation of such as possible of the member of the opposition. Thank you.
All right, good evening. So I'll start with some comments on what the leader of the opposition just said. One of his first points was that when you have young kids, that they're a lot of work. I guess I'd raise the point that having kids isn't necessarily an early thing, right? A lot of people have their first kid when they're 35, and 20 those relationships often start in the early 20s. So by the time you have kids, that's 10 years old, or you're 10 years on. The in-laws can be a problem in the early years. Well, I'd like to. We should all be so lucky as to have your in-laws that I guess where everything worked out after the first few years. They can continue to be problems for many years on. I thought. The expectation. I thought what was really curious is expectations are high, and then reality sets in as being an argument for it getting better later on. Well, I mean, I think while you're in that ignorant bliss is where it's really more enjoyable. When reality sets in, I think it sets in, and you're suddenly not as happy. And I mean, I think I'll touch. I think the point in divorce actually is really important, because I think that is truly the crux of why the early years are the best. You look at relationship as a point of fact. The opposition said that divorce 50% of relationships end in divorce. That divorce rate increases over time. It marches steadily higher in terms of total relationships that have been that have broken down. There's not, and I know from researching a previous debate here, that there's not a magic number. It's not if you get past the first 3 years, if you get past the first 5 years, that all of a sudden divorce becomes negligible. No, it marches on and goes closer and closer to that 50%. So if the early years, if the later years were truly the best, I think we would see a really sharp plateau, which we don't. Some additional points. The leader or the prime minister spoke about the early years, and I think I'd like to elaborate on that a little bit. When you have something new, whether it's a relationship, a new partner that you want to introduce to your friends, when you're in that lovebird stage of not being able to stop holding each other's hands, it's exciting, it's enjoyable, you don't want to put it down. And that's true, not just for people, but for objects too. You know, you buy your new car, you're getting your house. When are you most excited about it? It's when it first happens. There's a reason why there's the honeymoon effect. Love is blind, but only for so long. And you know, slowly you start to take your partners for granted. The novelty wears off. There isn't that excitement, and what starts to happen is, you know, that those little grievances, those annoyances, the first time your partner interrupts you, or your husband is sloppy, doesn't clean up, or is snoring, you know, who cares? The 100th time, you're fine. The 1000th time, you know, it might start to build on you. And I think that's why we see that divorce rate going higher and higher. Another point that the Prime Minister spoke about is the fact of age, and I think with that is beauty. You can, fashion models are in their early 20s quite often, and men can be slightly older, but in general, they're young. And I'd like everyone to picture their ideal mate. What are the physical characteristics of them? Take a moment. Right? And now picture someone who's 90. Is there a disconnect? Probably, right? And if love truly got better as we got older, or I'll start with that attractiveness is an important part of romantic love. It makes it enjoyable, and if it got better as we got older, that attractiveness would stay the same. We wouldn't have that decrease or that wrinkling, the bulging, the bloating, the decay that we find as we get old. So, love is best in the early years. You have the excitement, the honeymoon, breakdown, and the beauty.
Thank you, Jonathan. Our final speaker for the presentation phase of the debate will be Danielle, a member of the opposition, who will speak for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Now it looks as if the government forgot what we're debating here tonight. What we're debating tonight is that the early years of love are best. And love was defined as romantic relationship and better as most enjoyable. My partner talked to you about the fact that why the early years were not the most enjoyable for a variety of factors, and I'm going to try to convince you that why the later years are better. Now, I want to tell you, Jonathan, that not every woman looks like a model, whether they're 15 or 20. Most models are in their teens. They're 13, 14, 15, to make them look older. But nobody can look like that in later years. One of the comments was that eyesight is getting bad as you're getting older. Let me tell you something. It's a good thing that your eyesight, it's a blessing in disguise. That's the way I see it. Also, we never talked about romantic relationship in terms of marriage. So we said 50% of marriage end up in divorce, but romantic relationship, the percentage of failure is even higher than that. So some of these arguments were not good. So what I want to present, it's quite strange, really. It's about, some of them are your very arguments. First one is that romantic relationship that lasts longer is a proven commitment. It needs time and effort to develop that trust and to learn to live with each other's idiosyncrasies. For example, there are people that on purpose let a relationship mature up to 7 years before they propose marriage. Why? Because they want to be sure that that relationship is going to be proven, that trust will be created somehow. Not only that, that particular person has a sister who left a good relationship and waited 30 years to go back to that earlier fiancé, and now they're happily together. She let it mature to make sure that, because she knows that it will be the most enjoyable one. The second one is the money. Money, by the time you're in later years, you're well established in your career, you have fewer pressure on you. You might be mortgage free, and therefore you can travel in style. Yes, you can travel when you're a teenager and when you're in the beginning, but camping, not my style. I like to go to a hotel with a warm shower. You learn to do enjoyable things. You can buy good wine. You know what? An extra $2 on a bottle of wine is nothing at all when you are in your later years. Time, you've got more time, and you can choose to be together. You have time to develop either your own hobbies or develop hobbies that you want to participate together. You've got choice. You've got the time to enjoy all of that. And surviving problems together really cement the relationship. This is really what makes you the relationship even stronger. It's proven, absolutely proven, that people who are in a long-term relationship are healthier physically, mentally, and therefore are happier. So let me ask you, don't you think that the early years of love are not the best? Because the longer it lasts, the longer you can enjoy it and make it most enjoyable.
Well, that concludes the presentation phase of the debate. Now we move into summation, and first you will have the Leader of the Opposition, who will speak for 2 minutes, followed by the Prime Minister, who will speak for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we will agree that those early years are great for doing whatever with your partner. We will agree with that. I thought in a debate you had to define your terms a little bit more, but we'll go along with that. If you're going to do with, if whatever is important, those are big years. Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you have been to a 10th wedding anniversary, the 20th, the 30th, the golden wedding anniversary? The feelings that you feel in that room with those people. Have you ever been to a party of a couple who have been together for 4 years? No, the kids, and if you are, it just doesn't happen because it's nothing to celebrate. It's just getting through those years is cause for celebration. I mean, that's when they should be having the parties, ladies and gentlemen, because that's a tough thing. To get through those early years is hell. And that's what you shouldn't have. Yeah, if they're married 50 years, who cares? You know, that's terrific. The real present should be getting through a couple years. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to just go through my points again, that why those early years are not so terrific. That you've got young kids, or you're trying to have young kids, you have daycare, you don't have enough money, you have career pressures, travel pressures, shifting jobs, someone's transferred to another job, causes all sorts of pressures. You've got in-laws pressures, family pressures, more competition for partners. You have office affairs, extramarital affairs. The expectations of marriage and those early years of a relationship are hard to reach. Entertaining is tough because you don't have any money or time. Usually both of the couple are working, and very little time to spend on each other, whereas those later years, you have far more time to nurture your relationship. And as I said, I'm going to finish with that same question. If those early years are so great, if they're so joyful, if they're so enjoyable, how come half of the couples never get past that? Thank you.
Now our final speaker for the evening will be Jerry, the Prime Minister, who will speak for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm perplexed because when I heard the Leader of the Opposition up here talking about all the problems, it sounded like all things that happened later on in relationships, and that's exactly what we're trying to prove. Anyway, let's focus on the early years of love are best. That is what we're trying to prove. As I said, the first few years, months, whatever, this is the time of bliss. It's exciting. You're getting to know each other. You're looking forward to spending time together. That is exciting. It's enjoyable. It's what everybody is looking forward to. It's a time of very few encumbrances. Chances are you don't have a house that you have a mortgage for, so you're not worried about that. You probably don't have kids, so that's not something that you have to spend your time and money on. You're not worrying about them. You have time for yourself. Time is something you have a big thing of, and you're not going to have that with all these commitments later on. My third point, youth and health. When you're young, you have energy, you have health, you have vitality. This comes out in travel, in exploration, enjoyment with you and your partner. And let's remember, the first 3 months compared to the last 3 months of most relationships, which are most enjoyable? Well, certainly if that last 3 ends in a divorce or in problems, then it's definitely the first 3 months. The early years of love are best. Thank you.
Well, that concludes the debate. The adjudicators will now repair outside to consult and deliberate. In the meantime, the adjudicators.
Thank you, David. I would have appreciated being privy to the conversation. I'm sure it was fantastic and very animated. These impromptu debates are the best. The topic could have gone either way. Sam and I had a discussion over who we thought won and who won the best debater and why. So I'll try to sum that up very quickly. So basically when Jared came out, he presented a few arguments. We talked about bliss, we talked about encumbrances, we talked about youth and health. What I thought was interesting is there was a presumption moving forward, maybe you've discussed this, that this was all about marriage, but there was really no marriage in the definition. It was romantic love, and I don't think that was clearly defined. And as an older person who married later in life, I have to say I am biased to a certain degree, although I try to be objective in this. The whole thing about youth and health, I didn't understand where that came from, because you can fall in love at any age, you can have romantic love at any age, and it's about the relative time to when you met that person. And I don't think I could, even in my best debate, argue that I was useful when I got married to my husband. So I found there were a few holes in that, but that's okay, that's how you presented it. But then Michael came up and took advantage of some of those points, and where the holes were, you say you have more time in the early years, but you also have more time in the later years. So you kind of opened yourself up for the opposition to come in and cut that down. And then you're talking about kids in the early years, or whether or not you have kids, and that also, again, that becomes an issue at certain points in a relationship. It can go either way, so I think that left the government a little bit vulnerable. And just getting to know each other, I thought that was a good point. It's true, there's that kind of euphoria that you get and all the pheromones when you first meet someone, and I don't think that goes away in any way age when you're really attracted to them. Then Michael came up, aside from entertaining us and trying to fill in the last minute, so you'd be docked for time on that one a little bit, but you talked about, I think you had a good rebuttal, you asked questions like, there were no specifics, you didn't define bliss, and other things, you poked holes in the argument. And then you talked about, you know, the world is an oyster, and I thought that was an excellent analogy because it takes time to culture a pearl the way you would, you know, cultivate a relationship. So I thought that was really nice. And then Jonathan, and you just made us laugh, and that was the best part. Jonathan came up and did his noble best to try to, you know, counter the arguments for the opposition, and I thought you did an excellent job with that. You were talking about, you know, with the kids, that sometimes you have to, like there's a time when waiting for kids and in-laws, it doesn't matter, you know, earlier at the end. I hope I'm getting this right because I'm just rushing through it. And then the best part was, you know, we're talking about reality sets in. And, it, you know, so in the early years, you're not really realistic here, kind of have rose-colored glasses. And then when you see how it is, that's when it really sets in and then the bliss is gone. So that was a good argument. And I also thought you, you know, presented the novelty of the honeymoon effect quite effectively. So it was very good debating. And then Danielle came up. And Danielle, I thought you were really animated and just systematically kind of cut down, you know, some of the presumptions in the earlier arguments. I thought the eyesight thing was excellent because, truth be told, if you are with someone and you're age appropriate, you never see them get wrinkled because you're both losing your vision at the same time. That kind of, you know, puts a null thing on that. And then, but then, this is where we get the first part about the romantic relationship, which is what we had been missing, I think, in the debate, because it was defined as romantic love. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be married to someone. It's about that, the romantic part of the relationship. And although I do think both sides were absolutely right, because you nailed it in the beginning, there's that novelty and the excitement, but then the opposition also cut down a few of the poked holes in the argument, but then built it up again from the position that it takes time and commitment to get a deeper purpose, a sense of meaning with your love, and that, you know, it can take years to propose. And when you have that commitment, it's not necessarily, you don't propose to someone the first week you know, you're dating them. It usually takes some time. And there are fewer pressures, your lifestyle's better, there's just more opportunity to enjoy it. So I think whereas both sides presented a really good case, in the end, there were just a few holes poked in the government side. And I think the opposition followed through by then laying out an alternative argument that was quite believable. So Sam and I gave this, the debate to the opposition, and we gave best debater to Danielle. And the only caveat I would say was really thought we were going to hear the jelly bean analogy. Surprised we didn't hear it.
Right.
You know, first 3 years you're married, you put a jelly bean in the jar every time you have sex, and then you'll never ever run out of jelly beans
It was
in that
not
jar.
about sex, it was about romantic love.
But it was exactly, it was about romantic love. So that's it. If you would like to come and get your trophies, or we'll give them to you. So congratulations. But I think I also gave you the people's choice, and I don't know what the results
Oh
are.
my God.
The
So I gotta
people's
give it
choice
back.
goes to the opposition as well.
So a trifecta. Congratulations. And congratulations, you guys into the farmhouse that your partners ever watched the video on. So